Good day, class. This is our uh, lesson in Module 3, which is actually the starting point, no? The starting point of another analytical tools for analyzing or looking at supply chain, or then looking at agribusiness systems. Now, this is Module 3, and this is lesson or lecture 3.4. We will be going from lesson 3.4 to 3.5 and then down to 3.6. So we will be looking at supply chain from the basic concept of supply chain. How is it different from value chain? And then down the line, we go into the various framework of a setup or structure of a supply chain, and how do we do supply chain analysis in terms of assessing the effectiveness of supply chain. So, firstly, we have um, you have something like a question about uh, why do McDonald's or say for example Jollibee or even whatever food chain you have will rarely run out of fried chicken. Or have you ever wondered why pork products are almost always available, but vegetables in wet markets often come at unpredictable availability? So these are the things that really supply chain the management or supply chain concept will come into play. So something like this, no? So this supply chain that is given uh, structurally or given in a illustrative manner, and these are all the different actors that are responsible in making sure that the food supply chain will actually coordinate with one another and until it reaches the final end. Okay, so this is also another example of a supply chain. This is the uh, upstream end, and this is the downstream end here. So you will notice that there are players and the participants along the supply chain that are coordinating each other or coordinating each other in order to make sure that what is needed at the end at the uh, downstream end will not will really be the kind of product that is demanded by the customers. Okay, so each particular say player, each particular segment of the chain has its own various activities and say matrices. Okay, so you have at the end of this term or at the end of this lecture, you'll be able to understand what the supply chain is all about. We'll be able to also differentiate what is the difference between a supply chain and a value chain. Okay, then down the line, we'll be able to identify different metrics or matrices of supply chain analysis. Okay, so firstly, what is a supply chain? Okay, in this lesson, we will see supply chain as a sequence of what processes and flows that is aimed to meet the final customer requirements at the downstream end. That take place within or between the different stages along the continuum from production to final consumption, just like that. No, you have here a connection from upstream end down to the downstream end. Now, another feature of a supply chain from the definition, the supply chain also is consisting of three types of flows. You have material flow, the products that are flowing within the along the system, or input flow, or there is also what you call information flow. There is an exchange of information from the from the customer and the buyer. Okay, and then if the deal is right, if the deal is agreed upon, then there is a continual flow of materials, and then there is also what we call as money or payment flow. Okay, the payment flow will always indicate that there is a change of ownership. There's a change process, and the payment will become revenue of your seller, and also becomes the cost for the selling the purchase price or purchase cost of the buyer. So something like that. It's a change of, say, money transactions and during the trading, say for example, activities. Now that is a typical a linear connection of a supply chain from supplier down to the customer. So you will notice that the cash flows is represented by a broken line, okay, broken line, and you have the material flows are represented by this bold line, okay. So the arrow is really pointing up to the level of the customer. Now, what is the difference given this particular initial say differentiation or definition? What is the difference between supply chain and the value chain? Okay. Now, how does supply chain differ from a value chain? You might be asking that the two are actually uh, uh, the same or they are used interchangeably, but we just have to make a conceptual difference or differentiation between what a supply chain is like is all about and what a value chain is also something else. No? Now, it is just a value chain. Is you have here a supply chain differs from value chain. These two concepts are interrelated since they both study the agri-food chain or the commodity chain. It is just a value chain is used when or it is a value to use in the when a commodity chain is viewed as a system whose aim and deliver value to customers. Okay? Supply chain, on the other hand, has a different focus. Okay, when you say supply chain, the focus is you have for supply chain, the primary focus is cost and price. While value chain, the primary focus is value and quality that is demanded by customers. What is the orientation? The orientation is commodity. Well, the orientation for a value chain is differentiated product depending on customer specification. Now, power relationship is supply chain is supply push. That means to say, flowing physical products down to the customer. While here in the value chain, it's demand pull. Depending on the demand, then that particular demand, once met, will also trigger the flow of products to the customer. The philosophy, actually, or the, the philosophical scaffold will be in supply chain, this is self optimization, while value chain is chain optimization. In other words, when you meet the requirements of the customer, then the value chain will also be more, more, more dynamics. Now, value chain analysis focus on delivering products that meets the requirement of or meets the value sought by the end customers. Meanwhile, or comparing it with the supply chain, it analyzes or a chain analysis looks into the cost incurred in delivering that product. In other words, as the product flows, for supply chain, making sure that no friction along the way, nga mo-flow yun ng product. While a value chain, making sure that what is flowing along the chain meets the requirements of the customer. So in other words, it's it's value chain that is more market driven, while supply chain is more efficiency driven. It's just concerned in terms of the physical flow of goods. Information from value chain analysis intends to provide insights on making the product match its intended market where it is highly valued. On the other hand, supply chain analysis investigates the physical flow of product. Now, supply chain of the firm consists of the business entities from customer. Okay? The supply chain in firms is the firm's lifeblood in being able to meet the sustained requirements of the customer. Now, what are the similarities of value chain and supply chain? First, both overlay, or whether it is value chain or supply chain, they both overlay the same network of firms. In one particular connection from production to market, there is both value chain and supply chain. When the value chain is has a well-defined demand or product specification. The supply chain also makes sure or will ensure that this what is demanded by the customer will go to the customer at the cheapest possible, say, uh, uh, cost, or I would say at the most efficient, say for example, uh, route of within the logistic, say for example, chain. No? So those are similarities. What about the differences? Supply chain talks about upstream flow of goods from supplier to customer. Okay, supply chain focus on upstream streamlined supplier. Value chain talks about flow of value. Okay? When supply chain talks about the flow of goods, value chain talks about the flow of value from customer up, up to the supplier. Meaning to say, the direction of value chain is almost like counterintuitive. In other words, the value emanates from the market and it is communicated, articulated up to the beginning of the upstream end. Okay, while supply chain will make sure that from the upstream end it will flow more efficiently as it transit from one segment to another until it reaches the final customer. That's why value chain is known as demand chain. Okay, it is actually a demand chain. Supply chain management focus on upstream to streamline supplier and manufacturer processes, while value chain focuses on downstream. That is the main issue for value chain. Downstream or the market, whether the producer has fully understood what is demanded by the customer. Now, the supplier will only make sure that what is demanded by the customer will flow into them at the most efficient, say, route or at the most efficient possible way. Okay? It is change in perspective, both value chain and supply chain, but can be considered as complementary. Why is that? It is a change. The perspective of value chain is the downstream end, meaning to say the market, while the perspective of the supply chain is the upstream end, or meaning to say the supplier. Okay, but they are actually considered complementary because if there is a well-defined, say, market specification, well defined and well understood across the the different segments up to the upstream end. Now the supply chain will make sure that it will reach the final customer at the most efficient route at the most efficient route or most efficient, say, possible way. Okay, so it is just a change in perspective. You focus on the market, that is value chain. You focus on the efficiency of the flow of products to the market, that is supply chain. Okay? So supply chain is a chain starting from the unprocessed product, raw materials, ending to the final customer. Okay? So while a value chain starts with the market and then communicate or articulate the product specs or specification to the producer. Okay? Take note that a fixed point in a chain where goods come to rest includes plants, warehouse, supply sources, and markets. There are intermediaries along the way, like farmer collectors, like travelers, or maybe vendors or something like that. But there are also fixed point. No? For example, assembly point. Uh, you have uh, like for example warehouse, it is, or buying station. These are fixed point where the supply of goods will flow into that particular station before it gets into the other participants in the market. Just like this one, you have agriculture, transforming or converting, transforming product with the processing, converting from other products, packaging, then shipping and selling down to the consumption. So that means from production down to the final end of the customer. Okay, just like this one also. You can see here a typical, say for example, supply chain. Okay, that actually produces certain various products, no, various products. So you have from this point inputs, and then it is converted to then you have sugarcane farmers or suppliers, and then it will be converted either to ethanol or sugarcane, and then if and it reaches the millers, and the millers produce the molasses, okay, and then it also produces muscovado sugar for international traders, and the bagasse here will come into the either a fuel in the no, in the engine, or it becomes it will be bought by the association or cooperatives as mud press, okay, and then the raw sugar will go to the sugar refineries will it will be refined for international trading, or it will flow directly to wholesalers and feed millers and even export market. Okay, so this is a typical supply chain, or yeah, a typical supply chain from uh, input side down to the market side, where there are co-products along the way that is developed. No, there are co-products along the way that is developed. So it can be no, it can be something like this, no, or it can also be something like this, no. So from the farmer, you have packaging, marketing, and market logistics. So it will either go to this hypermarket or food service or retailers, and then these are the end customers. So it's a pretty straightforward from farmers down to the retail markets. Okay, supply chain of egg production industry. Now that is that is 3.4, just a conceptual definition of what supply chain is all about. Let's go to supply chain analysis. Okay, supply chain analysis. Now, supply chain analysis actually you have uh, definitional perspective here. A supply chain versus supply chain versus uh, supply chain supply chain versus supply chain management. Okay, so you have a supply chain refers to the sequence of sourcing and the market functions of individual enterprise, while supply chain management is a term used in manufacturing to describe ecology of partners involved in providing parts or something like that. So here, supply chain is more management is more of management of partners coordinating to produce the final product, whilst a physical supply chain is just a sequence of sourcing on the market. And in some cases, the term supply chain is more specifically linked to a lead company with activities and services focused on optimizing. This lead company is otherwise known as supply chain champions, the dominant firm that orchestrates the movement of product from upstream to downstream. Okay? So supply chain versus market chain. A supply chain refers to sequence of sourcing, while a market chain, general term used to encompass series of market players. Okay? So that is a market chain. You have market player involving in the production, trading, processing, etc. And then in some cases, the term supply chain is more specifically linked to a lead company with activities and services focused on optimizing the flow of goods. So in a supply chain, we always zero in on the supply chain champion or the lead company that coordinates everything from upstream, downstream also. Okay. Now you have also supply chain versus value chain. So we have defined that a while ago. What is the difference? What are the similarities between them? So I need not re-emphasize it again. Okay, what about supply chain analysis? Supply chain analysis is the process of evaluating every stage of a supply chain, starting from the time the business acquires raw materials until the time it serves the purposes of the needs of the customers. So, very quickly, a supply chain would always say desire to improve or shorten the delivery of products to its customer. Now, there are four C's of a typical supply chain. You have when you talk about supply chain, there are four C's. And these four C's, or letter C, actually is also the object of analysis in order to assess whether the supply chain is effective or not. Okay, so you have here the courses. You have change structure, competition, capacity, and coordination. Let's take a look at change structure. Okay, the change structure is the backbone of the pipeline through which information and material flow in the supply chain. So that means to say that when you say the backbone from input suppliers down to the customers, that's the basically the backbone. Okay, so uh, you have here a connection that is also defining the typical supply chain map, and then there are products flowing, there are informations flowing, money and information. Because as the supply chain, as the goods transits into the chain, the product will flow down to downstream, but the money will flow upstream because when you deliver, you receive the money, and then deliver it again to the next node, they receive the money. That means to say the money is flowing upstream. Upstream, okay. What is flowing downstream are the cost that is transmitted. Okay, while information is a double arrow connection, while because both will feedback so that the sustainability and the consistency and the reliability of the chain is made possible. Okay, that is chain structure. In the chain, commonly used supply chain structure would be serial supply chain, assembly structure, distribution structure, assembly followed by distribution, or network structure. Like for example, this one, serial supply chain. So it's just a very linear connection from A to the customer. Serial supply chain consists of a number of entities that work sequentially. That's why it's called serial supply chain. Well, we have the assembly supply chain. You will notice that there are various location of entities manufacturing or majoring on specific products, and down the line, this is a car manufacturing assembly. They deliver to one particular, like for example, assembly line, and the assembly line produce the final product to its final destination. It's assembly structure. Maybe one is located in Davao, another one is located in Cebu, another one is located in, like for example, Zambales, and another one located probably in Vietnam. But all of them will converge to Metro Manila or Batangas, where you have the final assembly point. Okay, well, it could also be a warehouse which is structured as a distribution point. It's the reverse of assembly or serial arrangement. You have here assembly structure. The reverse is actually a warehouse structure or distribution structure, where you have warehouses and then you have distribution outlets from different locations. That is a supply chain. Okay, from the warehouse receives the supply from the factory and distributes to various players along the chain. Okay, then you have assembly followed by network distribution, followed by distribution. Assembly and distribute is also something like that, no? And then you have just like this one, another is a network structure. It's a network of connection, exchanging products or exchanging goods in order to sustain their particular supply chain function. Okay, so one is, for example, you have supplier one to I one, and then to A one, and then to W one, and then to C one. But actually, supplier one also is supplying say for example entity one, and then both A1 and A2 is also supplied by I2. So this is a network chain. Okay, so it's changing possible say materials and also goods, no? Network, and then you have chain structure summary. No, in a chain structure, you also have competition. Okay, a competitive supply chain has to provide customers with expected superior performance. That is another C in the supply chain. First is the 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 structure or the setup, and then you have another is competition. Okay, you have competition in terms of like uh, either time based, resilience, or what you have also environmentally responsible supply chain. So depending on the what is preferred by the customer. If the customer prefers uh, on time delivery, so your ano your the your you focus on your supply chain to be have an on time delivery. If it is resilience, that means to say you can accommodate any volume at any given time, then you are also capitalizing on that skill, on that advantage. Or you can also be a very agile, meaning to say easily a supply chain that can easily adjust to various customer orders. Or you can be also, say for example, very efficient. Okay, very efficient. That means you deliver goods at the cheapest possible cost, or something like that. Or you also can capitalize on your uh, advantage, for example, technical and technological advantage, to be environmentally responsible supply chain. Okay, these are some of the matrices of competition, depending on what is demanded by the customer, whether the customer wants on-time delivery, or the customer is also particular about your resilience. That means to say you can adjust to various disturbance or perturbations along the entire dynamics of the chain. No? Now, the other C is capacity. No? Capacity refers to the design maximum flow. Okay, organization of different elements in a complex body of activity, so that to enable them to work together, what to coordinate product, payment, and information. That means to say coordination is very important. That means its relationship between the chain is very well organized. That is very important for a supply chain, because if you are well organized, you can respond to customer. You can be flexible to respond to customer specification. So either for product, payment, or information. Okay, meaning to say if you are well coordinated, each one of you is, or the whole connection, the whole alignment of firms until you reach the market is very well. There is a free flowing of information, and there is no holding up of items because of not being able to pay. It doesn't exist that way. The payment is free flowing, and the product quality and quantity is also consistent. That is a supply chain with an excellent coordination. Now, it's just like, for example, this one. Fragmented chain is something like this. Cooperative chain is something like this. Okay, while coordinated chain is something like there are overlaps where they can communicate very well. And then this is also a diagram for collaborative chain, meaning to say they what they converge with one another, and really also help one another. Coordinated chain is something that is as the very efficient. There is a good seamless connection from A to B, because there are overlaps. They can communicate very easily. No? Coordination also is very important to model in terms of time, and then information shared, and also information decision or timing of decision. That can also be a way by which you improve the efficiency. Now, just like, for example, how many days it take to deliver fertilizer from CDO to corn farms? That is something. Or how many days would it take to deliver uh, mangoes from Davao Oriental to Hong Kong, or something like that? Okay, so it's time bounded, like this one from the start, and then at between for example, at any given time, it reaches your end customer in, like, how many, in less than 2 hours, or less than 2 hours, with a cost of 1 peso per bag, something like here. The distribution will not allow for hold up point, meaning to say ma-hold ang iyang delivery. Just like, for example, the mangoes in Davao Oriental going to Hong Kong. Now, it was harvested late in the afternoon of Monday or Saturday. It should reach Hong Kong by Wednesday. Okay. It was harvested, flowing to the next segment, the trader, and then the packing plant goes to the airport. Wow. When it reaches Davao Airport, there was a strike. PAL will not fly because there was a strike of the employees. So there was a hold up time of something like half a day. And then half a day, the owner of the cargoes negotiated for to be loaded to Jetson, and then the truck brought the goods of truckloads of mangoes to Jensen, and it flew directly to Manila, but it was already delayed by 2 to 3 hours. Now, once it reaches Manila port, there was already a delay of something like almost half a day already, or more than half a day. Now, good that the buyers in Hong Kong made an allowance to maybe plus or minus 2 days. So, had it not been for that particular allowance, it could have been rejected along the process, right? The basis of rejection, for example, could be overripe fruit or deteriorated fruits or what have you, or maybe contamination along the way. So there are times that really very it's really time bounded, or mostly it's time bounded actually. No? So you also have a tomato supply chain, shipment to Luzon. Okay, so from the farm, it's sorting and bagging, loading, and it goes to trucking, unloading, and then transport, and so on. Shipment to Manila. Okay, and then from Manila to the unloading in Manila. So that means to say it should only cost about 823 per van, a huge container van. So if it is going to be delayed, it will increase the cost. Okay, so it's really time bounded, and also cost is monitored. Now, in in the future, no, as we look at supply chain, as we analyze supply chain, there are various models of configuration of supply chains that are in operation in the in in the market today. So one here is you have here a channel. If you analyze a supply chain, you need to have a configuration. You need to understand what's the configuration of the chain that you are looking at. First, there are three types of configuration of future supply chain models. You have chain master model, you have chain web model, and the chain organism model. Now, what is a channel master model? A channel master model has a dominant firm or a supply chain champion. If you know that in the supply chain that you're looking at has a dominant firm, meaning to say, what is a dominant firm? Everything is dictated by this particular influenced by this particular say entity, both in terms of pricing, quality, and all other specs in the market. Okay, so the supply chain rises and falls competitively based on coordinating skills of this particular firm. Okay, just like for example in abaca industry, the dominant or shall I say the supply chain champion there is the grading baling establishments of the abaca industry. That is where the centralized grading and baling into specific standard classifying before it gets into the pulp mills or even sent directly to the export market. Okay, it's a huge assembly point where it influences both the upstream end and the downstream end. Okay, if the GBE or global grading baling establishment is really very inefficient, it will impact on the export market. It will also impact on the farmers. Okay, just like this one, you have a channel master model. The manufacturing operation or manufacturer is the supply chain champion. Okay, now the dominant firm, and then suppliers, and then from there it goes to the distributors until it reaches the final customer. Okay, so what about chain web model? Okay, the chain web model. It is an integrated supply chain in which individual firms compete with others outside the respective supply chains. Integration is created through a broad range of relationships, joint ventures, and collaborative initiatives. Okay, just like this one. Okay, a chain web. Now, the red connection is a web of connection between supplier A to manufacturer A to supplier C. So they are say coordinating with each other, but actually supplier A and supplier B is also a web of connection. Why in one supply chain for supplying to the same customer, even supplier, say for example, C. No. Now, just like for example, in I will repeat again in abaca industry, supplier A. Okay, for example, if one supplier is receiving, like for example, abaca fiber, but you have here a what uh, uh, the the high grade quality abaca fiber, they send directly to the manufacturing operation. Okay, send directly there. But the low grade fiber, like for cordage, for ropes, and other low grade, say low grade quality requirements, they will send it to Manila Cordage or Supplier C. Now, Supplier C will make use of that, and they will either send it to the factory, and then the factory, what or manufacturer, process that into ropes or handicraft, or send that directly to distributors or down to the same customer. Okay, it can go in that configuration. It's a supply chain webbing itself to another or connecting itself to another supply chain, because there is a mutual or synergy of relationship in terms of products and co-products. Okay, now what about chain organism model? Okay, it is an integrated supply chain model, a model in which the supply chain itself competes with one entity. Okay, just like that one. Okay, this is a chain organism model from one supply chain competes with this particular supply chain. Okay, so they are parallel, but they cater to the same market. Okay, and they said, or some scholars have said that in the future, it's the competition of firms will no longer be individual, but it's going to be competition of different supply chains. The supply chain of the Philippines will compete with the supply chain of Vietnam, will compete the supply chain of Leyte, will compete the supply chain of Iloilo, something like that, depending on what particular product and market that they are catering. Okay, so these are the future configuration of supply chains. Now, for agriculture and food and natural resources supply chain, you can either have a chain web or chain master model. Okay, so you have here a farmer, processor, distributor, and retailers. The AFNR, or agriculture, food, and natural resources supply chain network, has some degree of uniqueness because the products being uh, carried along the chain, first of all, perishable, ungraded, and it's also highly connected with various input network of input supply chains. So production support is very important. It is also very sensitive to social, for example, social preparations, because mostly if in our commodities are dominated by what? By small holder producers. And these are unorganized and really very fragmented. So there's some kind of enough social preparations and also enough social, like for example, engagement in order that that supply chain will work if you are dealing with AFNR commodities. Okay, so this is how far we can probably discuss on supply chain. Now we will continue with another lecture on supply chain that will talk about like on analysis of supply chain effectiveness or efficiency. So far, we have discussed the meaning of supply chain, its differences between supply chain or and value chain, and even with market chain, and how do we look at supply chain from the vantage point of competition, from the vantage point of capacity, and other parameters or say areas of uh, analysis if we want to assess the effectiveness of a supply chain? Are you going to strengthen your supply chain in terms of uh, agile, very quick to respond to customer response or customer orders, or are you going to make the supply chain a supply chain that is delivering product at at a least possible cost way, or are you going to organize your supply chain in terms of being able to accommodate various factors in the environment? Well, depending on what the customer uh, needs, what the customer would like you to have, then focus on that in whatever type of, say, competitive advantage. Now, next session, we will have a discussion on how to assess efficiency of supply chain. So for now, I would say thank you for really going into or listening to this lecture, and I will end at this point. Please refer to this recording so that you will be able to review and go back if there are things that you need to understand further. You can chat me. You can post your questions if you have some clarifications on this. So thank you and have a good day.